You're watching WCSH News Center 6.
Friday will mark 50 years since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Memories of JFK as a leader are colored by the shocking and abrupt manner of his death. But there are many who can recall what the new frontier was like. We spoke with 4 prominent Mainers who say, well, Kennedy had his flaws and his political setbacks. His administration was an idealistic time in America.
Let us always make clear our willingness to talk, if talk will help, and our readiness to fight, if fight we must.
When John F. Kennedy spoke at the University of Maine in October of 1963, the 1,000 days of his presidency were almost spent. Just weeks before Kennedy's Dallas trip, the country was still energized by its young president.
The country was electrified.
Senator Angus King was a high school student in Virginia when Kennedy was elected. He says he wasn't especially political then, but he recalls the change from the Eisenhower years was noticeable.
There was this sort of a feeling of loss of energy, and Kennedy it just absolutely ignited that energy in the country, and it's impossible to underestimate.
Those were exciting years in Washington.
Portland Attorney Harold Pacious was on a Navy ship the night of the 1960 election. After a long night tracking the returns in the radio room, he had made a decision.
And at that point, I said to myself, I want to go to Washington when I get out of the Navy and be part of this administration.
I was in Washington, D.C. I had just completed law school and begun working as a trial lawyer at the United States Department of Justice.
Former Senator George Mitchell didn't know JFK personally, but ended up working for his brother, the new Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy.
The memory I have of President Kennedy first is that there was a tremendous snowstorm on the night before his inauguration. My car broke down, and I had to walk about 4 miles to get to my apartment in a raging snowstorm.
And that I've never forgotten his affability and his accessibility.
Noel Paul Stuckey has lived in Maine for decades. But when JFK was elected, Stuckey was part of the folk music scene in New York's Greenwich Village. He and his partners in Peter, Paul, and Mary contributed greatly to the soundtrack of the new frontier. The trio joined some other major acts of the day to perform for the president, who spoke to each artist afterward.
President Kennedy came to Peter and I, and he said, I noticed that when you sang one of the songs that the people burst into applause. And so Peter said, well, yeah, that was If I Had a Hammer. And then he said it was a single. And then he thought to himself, my God, the President of the United States, see, a single is a small record with a large hole. And the President reached out, put his hand on Peter's arm and said, no. He said, I understand that. He said, I just don't get a chance to listen to the radio driving to work anymore.
Stuckey recalls having the sense that change was possible. So does Harold Pacious, who found himself at the Peace Corps, working with JFK's brother-in-law, Sergeant Shriver.
And for me, it was a wonderful opportunity because the Peace Corps was the hottest place in town. That was the coolest place, hottest place, both at the same time. It really was wonderful. I'll tell you, I remember going out to the other side of Lafayette Park, across from where the Peace Corps headquarters was, when the President rode up Pennsylvania Avenue with John Glenn, who was the first American to circumnavigate the globe in space. It was so exciting. Tens and tens of thousands of people lining Pennsylvania Avenue.
And that teenager who had not been terribly political heard and still hears the call to action from the young president. One of the things Kennedy tried to do was inspire young people, especially to public service. Is that planted the seed in the 17-year-old Angus King?
No question. No question. I think it's a whole generation.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
He made it cool. He made it something that people felt worthwhile and felt was an honorable calling.
Tomorrow night we will hear about their memories of November 22nd, 1963. One of these men was in the White House that day. Another was in Dallas. Sports is next on News Center. The Celtics look to avoid their